So it turns out that Adobe Premiere Pro has some issues with synchronizing video from different cameras where there are gaps between the video playback, the frame rates and or time codes are different, and there is not a great way to do this when stretching might be required to compensate for drift, which is a slightly different rate of playback or time code throughout the play of the video or audio. However, there are free tools which allow us to do this alignment quickly and easily, and we can use that alignment as an export into Premiere Pro to do our multicam editing. DaVinci Resolve is the program we'll use, and I'll do it right from the start with a new project. We're going to call this project FA25J. And this is the introduction screen, which is for cutting our media. I'm going to go ahead and import all of the media I have just so we understand the structure. I have a Nikon camera set of shots. There are gaps between the Nikon camera shots. I have a Sony cam shot, which is continuous, but in different files. And then I have a single swivel video that has 4 tracks of audio, and that is continuous throughout the entire video. I have pulled the swivel audio out into separate tracks so that I can use them separately. Note that if we use more than 2 tracks for any of the media items in DaVinci Resolve, exporting will flatten that down to stereo. So we'll need to make sure that we have the separate audio in order to compensate for that. Note that when I try to pull in sources that have different frame rates, DaVinci Resolve will automatically ask if you want to change the frame rate, and so we'll look in our project settings to make sure that our timeline frame rate is the highest frame rate, in our case 59.94, rather than the lower frame rate of 30 frames a second that was shot on the swivel camera. Now, since we're in the cut video area and that's been sort of done successfully, we'll go over to edit and we'll start lining up our tracks. Note that the automatic alignment tool requires that each clip, I should say, is on its own separate track. We don't have a timeline created yet, but DaVinci Resolve will do this automatically as you start dragging your clips into the timeline shown. So just so that we can align this correctly, a very good first step is to decide which track is going to be your master sync timecode. And for us, that will be our swivel video, which is this one down at the bottom. So we'll make sure that that is on track 1 because this is our master source. You'll note that the new timeline was created as a result of making this video. Also, you'll note that when we pulled this video into the timeline, that we only see one audio. We could split this up if we wanted to. However, I already have the audio as separate pieces, so I'm going to pull those in as well. From this point forward, it doesn't matter what order we do everything in, as long as they are all on separate tracks. So I'm just going to grab each of our video sources and throw them on the timeline. Note that if you run out of space, you can drag a track in and move the mouse slightly upwards in order to create another new track to drag it onto. Now we have all of our clips on separate tracks, and we are going to be able to use the automatic align clip tools by selecting all with Control A and then right-clicking to auto align clips. This will take just a moment. We're not going to use timecode, we're going to use waveform, and track number 1 is going to be our master. As we synchronize, it will deal with the issue of drift as well as the issue of arrangement, which Premiere will only do arrangement and does not account for change in total stretch to account for drift. Notice that when we completed, this clip said that there was no match found, which is true. This clip right here was made as a result of all the other cameras being off and this one not being turned off. So we're not going to use that clip. It was after the session was over. And now we have a very nicely aligned set of things that are all on different tracks. For our export, we're going to want to make sure that all of these are actually on the same track for each video source. So all the DSCs I will move down by clicking each one of them individually, holding down the Alt arrow, and pressing the down key. We've chosen track 5 right here for the DSCs, which are the Nikon videos. And be careful you don't overlap, because that will destructively erase some of those tracks. And then we'll do the same process for the rest of these, which are the Sony cameras, or rather the one Sony camera. We're using the Alt shortcut to make sure that we don't move anything at all in the timeline. There may be a more efficient way to do that, but that was reasonably fast. Also notice that we have our original audio and video for the swivel on track 1, which is our reference marker, as well as individual tracks for the swivel audio, so that when we export our timeline, Premiere will consider these as separated. So now this is ready to go. We'll save this project and export it as a timeline. Shortcut Control-Shift-O. We'll pick where we want to save it. Note that a DRT timeline file is a DaVinci specific timeline. If you want something more compatible, this FCP7 XML version 5 is a great way to go. So we'll go ahead and export that, replacing the one I previously made while I was testing the process prior to making this video. Now that it's exported, we'll go into Premiere Pro. We'll make a new project, and we're going to go ahead and import that timeline. I've noted that if we try to import from the File menu, the import gets stuck. So I've learned that I need to drag my import from the File browser into the Media browser in Premiere. Once I've done that, it will think for a moment, import all of the clips, as well as the timeline as a sequence. So we'll go ahead and make a bin just to keep this sorted as our DaVinci import. Unfortunately, we ran into a little problem here in that Premiere does not correctly import the XML file, which means if we're going to use this perfectly synchronized set of files, we'll have to first export them so that Premiere can re-import the video in a synchronized fashion. We'll do this by first going to the Deliver tab. And one minor change that I would make to the settings is to use an uncompressed format such as ProRes 422HQ. Set your location for the output, and then you can change the file setting to individual clips, and we can change it to source name. Once that's ready, we can add these to the render queue, and then click Render. I'll need to free up some disk space if I use this current location, so I'll change it. If disk space is an issue, you can use a compressed format with some loss of quality, which may not be that important for projects done at this resolution and quality. I have now added them to my render queue, and I'm going to render all. This is what the setting is supposed to be in Premiere Pro, according to Google Gemini, but we'll see if it actually works that way. And this timeline right here, if we open it up, shows all of the clips in an organized fashion. We are almost ready to make a multicam sequence. The only thing that we need to do now is to take each of our individual clips here and make them their own subsequences to import into our multicam sequence. I'm not actually sure how the audio import will work for this, but we do note that these are not correctly linked to the audio for their sources, and DaVinci did make a blank video track that was linked to the audio below. So I'm going to go ahead and link each of these individually, where the 00.mts is going to be linked to its own audio source with a shift-click link, and I'll do that for all of these. And now that all of our audio tracks show the letter L in the bottom left corner to show that they are linked with their video tracks, I'm going to make some subsequences from each of these individual tracks to import into our multicam sequence. So this is our Sony camera. I'm going to make a subsequence and carefully label it as Sony subsequence. We have our Nikon camera. And so I've made subsequences for each of these tracks and named them so that I know what they are. And from there, now that we have all of our subsequences appropriately aligned and compensated for drift, we can right-click on each of these subsequences, making sure I have everything there, which we do. And we're going to make a multicam source sequence. A few important facts here. We want to align these to timecode, and we do want to create a single multicam source sequence so that when we create this, we won't have duplicated videos every time there is a different track. That looks like more empty spots in your multicam selection window, which is why we're selecting this to cut down on that. We also want to include all of the audio from all of the cameras, and our audio channel preset will be automatic, and we'll use the clip names to enumerate the cameras during our camera selection in the multicam window. I named it Multiseq. And one more time emphasizing that we are including all cameras for our audio. If we were to click switch audio, this would make sure that the audio is always matched to the camera, which would be good if our cameras were synchronized to their audio sources, but they are not. So we're going to include them all, and we will edit them in our post-processing. Now we have our subsequence. We're going to pull that out into the main folder and collapse everything that we don't need to look at anymore, and then open that multicam sequence. Note that when you double-click a multicam sequence, it does open in the source viewer. You'll need to right-click on it and say Open in Timeline to open it in the timeline. We'll see all of our different cameras going on here, and we are almost to the point we need. Note that here we have multiple cameras going on, but when we open the multi-camera view, that we are not seeing this different choices that we would have for our camera selection. So in order to fix this, we need to make a new sequence from this multicam clip. And once we've done that, you can see that this is now a single shot where we get to pick our cameras using the number keys on the keyboard, 1 for the first, 2 for the second, 3 for the third, 4th, 5th, 6th, and so on. If you click while the video is not running, then it will change the camera for all of the source up until that point and afterwards until you make any cuts. If you are running the video and make a cut while the video is running, such as pressing 2, the timeline will now show that cut, and everything up until that point will be what you decided the cut would be. After you've made the cut, now we've switched to the other camera, you can actually right-click on that particular section in the timeline. You can go to multi-camera and select which camera view you want to include in that part of the timeline. And you can undo, but I don't know of any way to heal once the cuts have been made. So making sure that you know how you want to cut as you go along is helpful. You can also manually do the cut using your classic cut shortcut, Control-K, followed by right-clicking on each section to say which sequence you want to include there. I think one thing that is a problem is that our audio sources for red, blue, and primary marker also had associated videos, and I wonder if we cut those videos, making sure they weren't linked to the audio, if the audio would still be included. I went ahead and unlinked those empty video tracks and noted that in our source viewer, the multicam sequence did go down to only 3 video possible sources. And did this change the output? Yes, it did, in our sequence that we made based on the multicam sequence. So we do not need those empty video tracks. Those can be deleted. As long as the audio is there, it will also be included in the subsequence that we're going to edit for final. So I will leave this in the DaVinci import, and this is our final sequence for editing. And then I can go ahead and start making my subsequences and clips based on this. And it turns out you actually can repair these cuts by right-clicking on it and clicking on the Join Through Edit. which requires that you move the playhead about to the area of the cut. Click on the cut. It is now highlighted in red, and you can say join through edits, and now there's no longer a cut. One more thing to be aware of is that in your audio track mixer, you may have different sources for your output, and that would look like this. The 1 and 2 here is being routed to where you will hear the output. If these are routed to any tracks that are not 1 and 2, then you won't hear the output, and we'll need to change those in order to hear the output. The only other note I'll make is that if you're going to make changes to the entire sequence, it is probably a good idea to do that change in the original multi-sequence editor so that those changes will propagate through to your sequence you've made based on it, as well as any future subsequences. That should do it.